Hi everyone, Amber here from Majestic. Welcome back to my channel. Today is our first sewing marathon of 2025. So happy new year if you haven't joined my channel yet. Today we are sewing up the Alice as part of the Marathon Sewciety sewing marathon. It can be made as a wallet, a wristlet, or a crossbody. So the smaller size is for the wallet. This is the larger size, and I chose to make mine as a crossbody with a metal chain strap. So I have used Theratex for like the accent and a vinyl that I found at Joann's for the exterior. So it features a flap with 2 magnetic snaps. And what the cool thing is that when this flap opens, it kind of creates this hidden slip pocket here, which I think is perfect for my phone. The front creates 2 little slip pockets that you could easily slip cards in there, and then it features a zippered closure and has a nice, pretty large, decent sized opening for a nice zipper pocket. So I really love this design. I think it would be great. You could dress it up to go out. It could be more casual. I think it's small enough that it would fit requirements at my local arena. I really love the chain strap. It's short enough that I can kind of like keep my hand, and then when I'm out in the city, I like to kind of hold my purse or whatnot, make it a little bit more difficult for someone to grab. So thank you so much to the Marathon Sewciety for allowing me to participate, and thank you to Sylvie, the owner of Lacus Designs, for allowing us to film your pattern. Her patterns are incredible. I'm going to have a link to all her social medias and her website below. Her patterns are written, I really feel like even beginners can understand them. Measurements are in metric and imperial, and she is so thorough with the instructions. So thank you again, and I've also included timestamps if you want to jump along. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and if you haven't already, I would love if you give me a thumbs up or subscribe. It helps my channel grow, and I appreciate it so much. Enjoy! Okay, so I have all my pieces laid out. I am using this vinyl that I found at Joann's for the exterior. I did not interface it since it's pretty sturdy. I have the waterproof canvas. This is the Pro Tough from Walmart. And again, because it has a PVC backing, I did not interface that. I am using a directional print. It is Theratex. So this is my flap piece. I have cut 2. If you have a non-directional, you can cut 1, so the black behind it is going to be the lining. I also did not interface this because Theratex doesn't need to be interfaced, and it is like non-wrinkle and whatnot by itself. However, I do want to give some structure to the flap, so I have also cut out a piece of foam. So instead of ironing on like a Decoville, I'm going to be using that foam. So I'll show you how to do that. I have my front pocket, and again, this is a directional print, and it's going to get folded, but I don't mind that part of it will be upside down. That will be inside the pocket, so you don't really see it. So just something to be mindful of. I'm going to make mine the crossbody version. So I have my 2 D-ring connectors. I cut them a little bit smaller than what's given in the pattern because I'm going to use 1/2-inch D-rings. And I did put some of the interfacing from Wallwack on the back. This is their thicker version of their own brand, Profuse or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to double check the name of it, but it's their sturdier version. And then I have 2 zipper tabs over there as well. And here I have all my hardware. I have 2 1/2-inch D-rings. These I believe I got from Wallwack. I am going to use our poinsettia flower zipper pull and our matching lilac with gunmetal zipper tape. Both of those are from our shop. I am going to use a purse chain instead of making a wristlet strap or making my own crossbody strap. I believe I got this from So Awesome Supplies. And then I have this kit that I ordered off of Amazon. It comes with a bunch of metal snaps, and I do think I have it linked in my Amazon shop. So I will be using that, and I believe that's all the hardware I need. If there's something else, I'll add it in as I go. And here's all the tools that I will be using. I have plenty of clips. I will be sewing with Tex 35 thread. I use this in both the top and in my bobbin. It is the variegated purple from Wizardry Stitchery. And I'm going to use a 9014 Microtex needle. I have a pair of snips, a seam ripper stiletto combo, my 3 favorite types of marking pens. The blue is water soluble. This one here is chalk, and this is a silver marking pen. I also have a lighter and some double-sided tape. If I use any more tools, I will also let you know as we go along. So for our first step, we are going to be working on our front pocket. This is going to be folded in half. So like I said before, if you have a directional fabric, you might want to take that into account. For me, I don't mind. It's going to be in the inside of the pocket. You're not going to see it. So on the back, I have used the pattern piece, and I have marked my 2 marks for our metallic snaps. And so we are going to put what they call the female portion on here. This is the part that has the center hole where it's indented. And so I have marked my centers, and these all come with washers. So I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to line up my marking with a washer and then put the 2 little vertical lines. And this is so I know where to slice it. And I am using Theratex, which is like a non-fraying material. If you are using a cotton woven, when you go to slice this, you probably will want to put some, what's it called? Either glue. I can't think of the name of it right now. Let me grab it. Oh yeah, some fray check. So if you have cotton, you can put some fray check on that, so that way it does not fray. And so then I take my seam ripper, and then I just very carefully seam rip on that line. If you are unsure about this or have like unsteady hands, you might want to use a small pair of scissors. For me, the seam ripper works just fine. And so I puncture it through and then just gently rip it. And we are putting the female from the front. So I'm showing from the back because it's kind of hard to see from this front side with the design. So if I flip this over, this is what it looks like coming through. And we have washers, so we definitely want to put our washer on. But I like to add another piece. So this is some scrap waterproof canvas that has that PVC backing. And it's about 1 inch by 1 inch, give or take. And I'm just using another washer to mark my vertical marks. And I'm going to add this just as another layer of support for this magnetic snap, especially because I don't have like really thick interfacing or anything. So this will definitely help. And then I always fold my prongs out to the left and the right. Some people like to fold them in because, they feel like it doesn't slide out as well. I've never had one of my snaps basically unfold and come through. So this is personal preference. And I bent them as far as I could. And then some people even put a piece of tape over here so that way they don't rub. My material, again, is waterproof canvas that this is going to be kind of butted up against after. So I think it's fine. So this is what it will look like from the front. So I'm going to repeat the same exact process on this left-hand side here and putting on my second female snap. And again, that's the one that has the indent to it. Okay, so I have just added that second snap. This is what it looks like from the back side. And again, if you want to put some tape over it, you could. So now in order to form our pocket, we are going to fold this right sides together. And I'm just going to clip it here in place. And then we're going to sew along this bottom only at the given seam allowance. I personally am going to sew it with the snap side facing up. That way these do not rub along the base of my sewing machine or get snagged on anything. So I'm going to take it to the machine and stitch across the bottom only. Great, so I've just stitched along the bottom. Now we are going to turn this right side facing out. Depending on your material, it might be a little bit stiffer. Mine doesn't have interfacing all the way across, so it should be okay. I'm just going to take my time and continue turning it. And if you have something like to help turn, that might work. I'm using, this is just a chopstick. I'm going to see if I can help push it through a little bit. And if you are using like a vinyl or waterproof canvas, you can even use a blow dryer and warm this up a little bit, and it will help it turn much better. Okay, so I am now just going to smooth this out so it's nice and flat, and you want to make sure that you are top stitching the correct side. So our line where we already stitched, that is the bottom. If you want to give this a press with an iron, go ahead and do so just to make sure that it's really smoothed down. And now we're going to take it to the machine and top stitch along the top here only. Right, so I have my pocket here. You can see that it is top stitched across. And then I have one of our main exterior panels. And it's a little hard to see because it's reflective. But on the right and left hand sides, I have a little marking. I did it in the silver marking pen because now we're going to take our pocket and line it up with that marking. And this is important because it does keep it out of the seam allowance for us. So I'm going to clip on both sides. Okay. And then I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and we are going to stitch on this pocket where you're going to go all like down the short side, across the bottom, and up the short side, making sure that you are back stitching at the beginning and the end. You might want to use a shorter stitch length or do some extra back stitching down here because this is going to be a pocket that gets used. And then the other thing is you might be able to see there's a faint chalk line here. This is going to split it into two card pockets. So after I stitch the pocket on, I am going to sew a center line of top stitching, making sure that I'm really back stitching at the beginning and the end, again, because that's going to be a pull point. You could even put a rivet here after, so something to consider if you want to stitch a little bit less or adjust how you are forming that center line. So again, I'm going to take it to the machine, stitch the three sides and that center pocket down. All right, so now we have our pockets stitched on. If you want to just double check that a card fits in each of these, this is what it looks like from the back. And I'm going to set this aside and grab all the pieces that I need to create our flap. All right, so I am using a directional print. So I actually have two shorter pieces for my flap, the lining, and I have the foam interfacing. So I'm going to set the lining and the foam to the side for a minute. And now you can see that I have my directional fabric here. If you have a preference for which one is on the top or the bottom, make sure that you put it now. And so what I'm going to do is I am turning this one the wrong way. So that way, this is the front of the flap, and then this is going to be that back side. So if you're looking from the back now, it would be right sides up. So in order to sew this correctly, if you are using two pieces, you want your front part or your bottom part right sides facing up. And then for this one here, your wrong sides. And so now I'm going to put them right sides together at that fold and clip it into place and sew it at the seam allowance given in the pattern, because this is going to create our one large flat piece now. So again, taking it here and just stitching along this bottom side only. Okay, so we have just stitched our seam. So now we are going to butterfly this open. If you have a material that you can press, definitely do that. You could use some double-sided tape to hold it open. I'm just going to use my hands because now we are going to take this back to the machine and we are just going to top stitch down the left and the right hand side of that center seam. And that is just going to help us hold open the seam allowance and keep this nice and flat for our flap. So I have just top stitched on both sides of that center seam, and I'm going to set it aside for the moment because we need to add our male snaps to our lining flat piece. So if you are using a fusible interfacing, you already have this fused on. I am not, so I'm going to show you how I am going to use foam, and you could adapt this yourself as well. So I have marked the center of the foam and the center of my flap, and that is just to make sure I am keeping this in place where it's supposed to be, and I'm going to clip that just so it doesn't move. And that's important because we're going to have to use this as our guide for stitching later on. So now that I have that marked, I have some double-sided tape. And I am just going to run that in multiple strips down the center. This is not a fusible foam, so I can't fuse it on even if I wanted to. So this double-sided tape is just going to kind of help me hold it in place. And then I'm going to install the male snaps, which will also help hold the foam in place and give it some cushion. So sometimes this gives me some trouble. I'm going to try to peel these off as quickly as I can. This is just 1/4 inch double-sided tape, and it is out of my seam allowances. My machine does not like sewing double-sided tape. That's how I get skip stitches, or it will stick too much and then my stitches are very close together. So I have made sure that there's plenty of distance from the edge. So now that I have that there, I'm going to fold this down and kind of give it a good press. So I have used my pattern piece to mark my centers of the snaps. So I'm going to do the same thing like we did with the other female portion. I have my washer here, and I am going to mark my vertical. Same thing over here. And so now when I slice these slices using my seam ripper, I'm going through the fold and the exterior. And so this is going to give me a whole bunch of cushion. But again, it's a little bit thicker, so you want to be very careful as you are slicing that mark. Okay, and I'm just going to grab a scrap piece of some waterproof canvas. I'm going to do the same thing, creating like an extra piece to go over it. Okay, so I grabbed that piece of the waterproof canvas and slit the holes already. So now I'm going to take the male piece of the magnetic snap. It has the little part that sticks out. So from the right side of the flap, I'm going to insert it and then through that foam lining. So I'm just making sure that I am lining everything up correctly. It's hard to see, especially with the foam. Okay, so it's come through. So I'm going to add a washer. And then add my waterproof canvas over it. And again, I bend my prongs to the outside. You could bend them inside, whatever works best for you. And I'm really happy that I used the foam for this because it gives a little bit of extra padding. So you can see that's what it looks like from the correct side. This is going to be the lining of the flap, which will align with our pocket. So off camera, I am going to install the second snap on the right hand side because it's the same exact process. Okay, so I have just added on the 2 snaps. This is our flap lining. So again, I'm going to flip this up and I'm going to grab my exterior and I am going to put these right sides together. So this is my exterior. It is right side facing up. This is my lining. It is wrong side facing up, so right side facing down. And I'm going to clip these together. And now this interfacing piece is very important because that's how we are getting a curve. I'm just going to go around and clip the sides. The top, we are not sewing together close. So I lined up the bottom. My top is a little bit longer, but I'm just going to trim that afterwards. It must have happened when I was putting, as I was using the pieces. So what we're going to do now is we are going to sew. So if you are using a interfacing that is attached, you are going to stitch along the edge of this interfacing. That is going to create that curved flap for you. Because I am using a foam, I'm going to try to stitch exactly on the edge to hold this into place. So if you have a machine that won't go through thickness, that might be a little bit difficult for you. You could still stitch on the edge, but it might be a little bit harder when we turn this right sides facing out. So again, you're going to stitch along the interfacing at the given seam allowance in the pattern. Okay, so I have just finished stitching around that foam interfacing. You can see it much clearer on this side here where it has the white backing. So now we are going to trim down our seam allowance, and if you have pinking shears, you definitely want to use them, especially around the curve. The sides, that doesn't matter so much, but the pinking shears around the curve will help that curve sit much better. And then I'm just going to trim the rest with my scissors because the pinking shears, sometimes they work better with like the stiffer fabric, so like the waterproof canvas. But the Theratex is giving it a little bit of a challenge. So I'm just kind of trimming it to about half. I'm not measuring it. You can eyeball it. If you wanted to measure it out, you could. But as long as it's about half, it should be fine. So now this is where I might run into some trouble because this foam isn't attached. It's only attached with those 2 magnetic snaps and the double-sided tape that I used. So we need to turn this right side out through this top here. So what I'm going to do is I'm reaching all the way to the bottom, kind of grabbing it between like my fingers, and I'm going to try to turn this all at once, hoping that because I pinch the base of the foam that it will kind of turn with it. So I might have to finagle with this a little bit more. So I can definitely see why it's better to use like a Decoville or whatnot in this particular flat. But I feel like with the materials that I use and the magnetic snaps, it just wouldn't be, it would be so thin in that area. And I didn't really want to be able to feel all the backing that I would have to use to make those snaps sturdy enough, I guess you could say, or structured enough. And I'm just poking everything out with my hand. That turned honestly a lot better than I expected. You can see that the foam is sitting in there pretty well. It's a little curved here, but that's fine. I can just flatten all that out now. And just to be extra secure, I am going to take a chopstick, kind of just rub that in the corners and really help poke out the rounded edges, because that will see, you can see where it fits much better than my fingers, and I'm really poking in. And sometimes I even take the chopstick and run it all the way across the seam allowance, because that helps poke it out much better than my fingers ever could. So once you have this all poked out and you're happy with it, you might want to give it a press. And you can see that when this folds, this has the part where the snaps are. This is going to be the front. It's right side up. On this side here, it's also right side up. So I'm very happy with that. And so now you can take it to the machine and top stitch all the way around, including closing up your top up here. And it might be a little bit thick if you're using foam like myself. My machine will go through it. You might just need to be very careful or hand crank, especially in certain areas. So again, I'm going to take this to the machine and just top stitch all the way around. Great, so I have just top stitched all the way around. It looks really, really good. It is a little bit thick in the seam because I did that foam. The foam that I used is called Naked Foam from Pellon. It works well on my machine, and it's a lot more affordable than the one that has like a tricot over it. And so I've been using that a lot lately and really recommend it, but I know it doesn't always work in everybody's machine. And so this is what it looks like from the lining side. I have my 2 snaps here, and I did top stitch across the top and trimmed off where my exterior was a little bit larger. So this is all set. And the other reason why I didn't use an interfacing that gets adhered to it, because this is Theratex and it smooths out its own wrinkles. So by using the foam, it's not attached, and it allows it to still move around and basically fix itself if it does get crushed or wrinkled. So I'm really, really happy with how that turned out. I'm going to set it to the side and we're ready for our next step. So now I have my completed flap and I have my other exterior piece. And on the bottom here, I've marked in silver marking pen the center. So we are going to take our flap and we want it on the exterior side facing up. So my magnets and the lining are down. And we want the side that is not the rounded edge, the one that is sealed up here. And I have marked my center. And so we are going to place our flap lined up with the centers on the bottom, and I'm just clipping them into place. And so now in the pattern, there's a couple measurements. You can check the distance away from the bottom here. It should be the same distance, and definitely want to measure it. And then there's also a distance given from the top. So I am going to off camera measure the distance down and mark it with my chalk pen, and then take this to the machine and stitch from that mark down across the bottom here and back up on the other side, back stitching at the mark on this side. So we don't want to go all the way up to the top because we're adding in a zipper. So you want to double check your measurements here. And it says to go over the stitch line in your flap. This won't be a problem for me because I used waterproof canvas and Theratex. So it's not going to like vinyl, where if it gets punctured too much, tend to crack. If you are using vinyl, I would offset your line by maybe like 1/8 of an inch, just because I would be worried about puncturing the vinyl too much in that same stitch length. So again, I'm going to take this to the machine. I'm going to start at the mark I'm going to put here, given in the pattern, stitch all the way down, across the bottom, coming back up and back stitching at the end on this side. Okay, so I have just attached the flap. It kind of creates like this pocket. You could probably see the stitching better from this side here where the purple kind of really shows up from the black. It does blend in a lot on this side. So I am going to set to the side, and I'm going to grab my front panel again, just because I'm making this a crossbody and I want to add my D-ring connectors. So if you're doing... Okay, so my original plan was to use the exterior vinyl for the D-ring connectors, but once I sewed it down on each side and then I started folding it in half, it's pretty thick, and I'm worried that when I put this on and with the layers of the exterior and interior, it's going to be too thick. So I'm going to switch plans, and instead I just cut 2 pieces of the Theratex, and I didn't interface these because they are like really sturdy as they are already. So I drew a line down the center because I am using 1/2 inch D-rings. It's a little bit smaller than recommended. I just didn't have bigger ones besides 1 inch, and I thought 1 inch was way too large. So I think 1/2 inch is fine. So I just cut these at 1 inch width, so that way when I fold them in half, they will be that 1/2 inch width. And I just put a piece of the double-sided tape down the center just to hold it enough that I can take it to the machine and top stitch down each side. I'm just going to put a clip here to help hold it. So I am going to take this to the machine and top stitch down each side and do the same for this piece here. All right, so I have just top stitched down these D-ring connectors, and this is going to work much better than the vinyl that I first anticipated. So I am going to put the D-ring connector on, and I like to sew a line of top stitching as close to this D-ring as possible. So I'm going to take it to the machine and top stitch each of them, and that just helps it so this does not turn around in your connector. The other thing that I'm going to do just while I'm there is I'm going to do the top stitch across, but then there is a measurement given in the pattern on each side. And so I am going to measure down and then place my D-ring connector at that given measurement with the D-ring pointed in. And I am going to baste it into place. So I am actually going to do that for both sides because I am doing a crossbody. If you're doing a wristlet, you can do one side, or if you're doing a wallet, you do not need to include this step. I just want to put this on now before I get to the zippers, and then I forget to do it. So again, I'm top stitching across each of these near the D-ring, the bottom of it, and then I am going to base stitch them into place on this front panel with the D-rings pointed in at the given measurement down in the pattern. All right, so you can see that I have top stitched the D-ring, so this is not going to wiggle or move around. And I have then basted them into place on the left and right of my front panel. This way I do not forget to add them on later on. And so I'm going to set this to the side, and we need our main or zipper, our only zipper, and it's already cut to length. I'm using a size 5 zipper from my shop and this poinsettia flower pull, and I just put it on using my hands. The right tooth is a little bit higher, and I'm right-handed, so I always start on the right-hand side, just insert a tooth or two, and then kind of bend that left-hand side to catch it. Sometimes it takes a little bit. And then usually it will sit right on top like that for me. And I can tell it's lined up because then I usually can just kind of push down with my pointer and it pulls on very easily. So what we need to do is we need to add 2 zipper tabs. So I have cut my tabs and marked the center already. So for this, I am doing the 4-fold method. I'm just putting a piece of, what's it called? Double-sided tape down the center just to help me hold it since I'm not ironing this. I don't want it to like kind of pop open on me. So I'm just folding each edge to that center and then folding it in on itself. So it creates like a little, I don't know, like a little clamshell, I guess, right? And so we are going to add this to each side of the zipper. I cut mine a little bit longer than given in the pattern. That's just my personal preference. Just makes it easier for me sewing on a domestic to catch it and be able to backstitch. So I am putting my zipper end sandwich between that. And I center it so there's a little bit extra on the top and the bottom. I'm going to clip that in place. And so then I'm going to take it to the machine, and I prefer to top stitch on both sides. That just gives me a little bit of extra peace of mind that it's more likely to catch the zipper and not pull out. So I'm going to repeat the same process for the left-hand side, and then take it to the machine and top stitch down both the left and the right-hand side of these tabs. All right, so I have just added on the zipper tabs and marked my centers of my zipper tape. It's kind of faint. It's in the light blue on the very ends where you won't see it. So now I'm going to take my front exterior panel, and I want my zipper opening left to right. So that's the way I have mine facing. You could reverse it if you want, whatever is your preference. And so I am going to take my center point and put this teeth side down. So I have the center already marked of my exterior panel and the center of the zipper tape. And I'm just going to clip my center first and then all the way out to the edges. And I don't know if you can see in camera, I also move my zipper pull when I am clipping my zipper, because you can see that there's kind of like a bulge here, and that can help or give you a wavy zipper. So by moving the zipper pull out of the way while you're clipping as well, I have found that that's really helpful for keeping straight zippers. And so now I'm going to bring this to the machine, and I'm just going to base stitch this in place along the top here. Okay, so I have just top stitched along my zipper, or like basted it into place. So now I am going to take one of my lining pieces and put it right sides together. So my exterior is facing up, my lining is right sides down, and my zipper is sandwiched between. And so if you want to mark centers and line them up, you can. I'm not going to, because it lines up fine with the edge that I have. Again, moving that out of the way. And so I'm going to take this to the machine now and sew at the given seam allowance all the way across the top here. I'm going to use my zipper foot, and my presser foot does not like sewing on the PVC side. So I'm going to actually put that against my feed dogs and sew with the vinyl side up. So if you have trouble with PVC waterproof canvas, I definitely recommend a Teflon foot or putting it against your feed dogs. So again, our full seam allowance across the top here with your zipper foot. Great, so I have just stitched at the full seam allowance. So what I'm going to do first is where my zipper tabs are a little bit poking out, I am going to trim those down, just even with the edge. And so now I am going to fold this open so it is wrong sides together. So our lining will be on one side and our exterior on the other. And whenever I'm using waterproof canvas, I always flip it to the back and really tug on it. Because you can see if you let it go, it kind of bulges up here. And I can't tell you how many times I didn't pull it tight and then my zipper gets stuck on it. So I am definitely pulling it as tight as I can to the back. Sometimes like you'll see me, I'm clipping the sides to help hold it back there as well. And even with like the zipper open, I will definitely pull from that center and clip in the middle as well. Okay, so once you kind of have this pulled back, if you're using a material that you could press to help keep it going in that direction, I definitely recommend that. So now I am going to switch to my Teflon foot, and I am going to top stitch starting at one end of the zipper tab all the way to the other end. And I'm just going to back stitch. I don't mind that you're going to see it. If you want, you could like pull your threads to the back. You don't want to go all the way to the end. If you go all the way to the end and you're sewing through your lining, that's how you get those funky corners. So again, when you're top stitching, make sure you're going from zipper end to zipper end. All right, so I have just finished top stitching. It does blend in, especially because of the shine on my exterior panel. You can see it a little bit better from this side here. In the pattern, I realized she does have you only stitch through the exterior. Like I said, for that waterproof canvas, I sometimes find it pops up and gets caught in the zipper. So my preference is to stitch through both, as long as you're stopping at those zipper tabs. So now we're going to repeat the same process with our other exterior panel, but we have this flap kind of in the way. So how we're going to do this is I'm just going to fold it back, and I have a couple of hairpins here, and I'm just going to kind of pin it out of the way. This kind of creates a little pocket. You could probably even fold it down into there. It is a little puffy because I'm using the foam, but I'm not worried about it. I can still reach over. So again, I have found the center. I found it on the back this time just because it was harder to find it with the flap in the way. So I am putting my zipper with the teeth side down, lining up the center that I had marked in blue with the center of the exterior. And so now this process is the same exact way that we did the other exterior side, as far as stitching this on, then adding the lining, top stitching. I just wanted to show you this part in particular because I know with the flap, it could make it a little bit tricky or confusing. And again, moving my zipper pull out of the way. So now that I have this clip, I'm going to repeat the same process. I'm going to take it, I'm going to baste it, come back, put my lining so it is right side facing down, making that zipper sandwich, sewing, folding it open, top stitching. So I'll come back once I have attached this second panel side. All right, so I have just top stitched on that back side of the zipper. That's what it looks like from this side. Definitely make sure that your zipper opens and closes without any struggle. So now from the front, we are going to have to sew this all together. So I am going to I'm going to kind of roll this and see if I can tuck it into here, because I think that's going to make it easier. If you can still like clip it to the, well, you can't clip it to the bottom because you'll sew it together, because we need to put our exteriors right side together and our linings right side together. So if you have that flap folded all the way back, you're going to accidentally sew it. So I'm going to tuck it into that pocket. I'm also making sure my zipper is open, and then I am aligning. I'm going to start at the bottom, just because this is a little bit bulky and I really want to try to keep it clipped into place. And so I'm clipping all the way around the exterior, and I'm kind of just like lining up the edges up here on the exterior side, clipping them. It does get bulky where the D-ring connector is, so be very mindful. And then I'm going to continue clipping all the way around and leaving an opening on the bottom. So I'm going to come back once I have clipped this all the way around. Right, so I have clipped all the way around. I have left quite a large turning gap in the bottom because that's how we're going to turn our bag through. The other thing to be very mindful of is, just as a reminder, if you have not added your D-ring connectors on and you plan on making a crossbody or wristlet, make sure you check that now, because once we sew this up, you'll just end up with the wallet. So my tabs are sticking out here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to take a slightly bigger seam allowance than what's given in the pattern. And I'm going to start here, rotate, do that larger seam allowance. When I get to the side of my zipper tape, I'm going to taper it to the seam allowance given in the pattern, because I do not want to sew. I can see where my zipper tab is right here. You do not want to sew over your zipper tab. If you sew over that, it's going to make your top look funny. It's not going to poke out correctly. So you want to taper to that smaller seam allowance. It'll come down the side, all the way across this bottom, small seam allowance along this side until I get to my lining, and then I'm going to taper it slightly wider again. That's just going to make my lining fit a little bit nicer, and back stitching at the beginning and the end. All right, I apologize. I did not hit record for the time lapse, unfortunately. So I'm just going to take an extra second to really show what I did. So the opening here is in the lining. I have the little stitches across the bottom because this is how we're turning the bag. So I've come across down the side, and I've added some extra stitching into the seam allowance to really hold that D-ring connector in. And then across the rest of the side, the bottom, and then coming back up over here. And the same thing, adding some stitching in for that D-ring coming back onto the other side. So I am going to trim off these excess D-ring connectors. I don't need that anymore. And before we turn it, if you're using a really thick vinyl, you might want to run a whole line of stitching all the way across in the seam allowance, especially if it's thick, or like down here where I have foam in it. That will help so your stitches don't show. And so before we turn this, we need to do one more thing. We need to box our corners. So I'm reaching into my bag to get to the bottom and do the exterior first. So I can kind of just like poke them and pinch them. And you could either open up your seam allowances or put one to the left and one to the right, like called nesting them. And that's what I'm doing. If you are nesting them, just make sure that they are going in the same direction and don't twist. So you can see this one here is pointed towards the right. So on this side, I want to make sure that my top part is to the right. They're just so small that I'm worried that if I try to put them open, it'll just be more difficult for me. Okay, and then the same thing with our box corners in the lining.
Yeah.
These I am going to butterfly open just because they're thinner, they're easier to reach, so they're not going to give me quite as much of a struggle. And I like just doing all four at once. You could do two at a time. I like to clip all four. And so now I'm going to take this to the machine, and I am going to line up that flat edge with my seam allowance marker and stitch across. That is going to create our box bottom. So the same thing here. Usually I like to hold my bag vertical, kind of press it down, pinch it down so it sits nicely under my presser foot. And where it is thicker vinyl, you do probably want to put an extra line of stitching there as well. Okay, so I have just boxed the corners with the small seam allowance and the thicker vinyl. It was kind of difficult on the bottom here, so I'm going to see how it turns out when I birth this bag, and if I need to go back in and make any corrections or resew anything. So now we had opened up our zipper, so I'm just going to reach inside And I'm actually going to pull my flap out first because that's really like one of the bulkiest things. And then just start turning this right sides out. I left a really large opening, so I'm thinking that it shouldn't be too bad. I don't have any super thick stabilizers or anything. So once that flap is through, this is kind of turning out a lot easier than I anticipated. And if you are using a thicker vinyl or anything, you could, again, take like a blow dryer to help turn it. Right, so I'm just gonna do the rest in time lapse, like really poking out the corners and taking my time on all the vinyl edges and such. Okay, so I have just turned it out. I'm pretty happy with how it looks. The bottom, the flap, that makes it a little bit bulky, but the box quarters still came out fine. The edges look fine. You can see with the top stitching that everything poked out. I thought I probably should have put my D-rings in a little bit more, but I honestly think they're fine, especially when I attach the strap. So I have not closed up the interior, so I'm just pulling this out now. Once you're happy with everything, you want to make sure everything's poked out first. So I am just popping out these corners where I had sewed a little bit. So that way I can just stick my pointers in and I kind of just give a little tug. And it helps the seam allowance just kind of come together on itself. And you could hand sew this, or like I've been using the purple variegated thread. So if you want, you could change it out to whatever matches your lining. This lining is down into my bag. So I'm not worried. I'm not going to change out my thread. I'm just going to top stitch this close. All right, so I'm just going to bring it to the machine and just top stitch as close to the edges as I can to seal up that lining. Okay, so I have just top stitched my lining closed. You can see it because I used that purple thread. And so now I'm really going to tuck this down inside and make sure that I am really pressing it into my corners. That way the lining sits really, really nicely. So I'm super happy with how this turned out. So let me show you. And actually, I can make it complete by adding my purse chain, which this is such a small lightweight purse that this chain is perfect. And that's why I thought these 1/2 inch D-rings were also perfect for it. So this is what it looks like from the front. I love that the flap comes down, the magnetic pockets line up perfectly. It hides those card pockets. Here's a view from the back. So when we open it up, you have those 2 little mini slip pockets. This is cool how the flap kind of turns into a hidden slip pocket. I think it would be a great spot for your phone. And then our cute little zipper pocket and the interior. So I'm really excited with this, how this came out. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I can't wait to see if you make one and if you chose to do the wallet or wristlet or crossbody, or if you adapted it in another way yourself. All right, so we have just finished up our Alice Crossbody. I absolutely love how it came together. I'm so happy that I used the foam for the flap. I think it worked out really well with the Theratex so it doesn't show any wrinkles. I cannot wait to use this. It definitely fits my arena standards. So I will be using this when I go to a concert. And like I said, it just fits so convenient. My phone fits back here. You can put some cards, any other goodies here in the center. So I really, really love this construction. I think it's so clever and such a cute little bag. It does come together very quickly. And I think that even somebody who is a beginner and really learning to make bags would benefit from trying out this pattern. So thank you again to the Marathon Sewciety. Please check out the other videos today and I'll have a link below. And again, if you haven't already subscribed, I would love if you subscribed or give me a thumbs up. It helps my channel grow and I appreciate it so much. Bye.